So should I introduce myself?
Yes, please.
Okay, cool. Should I go?
Yes, please.
Hi guys, my name is Aubrey Mnisi. I am an entrepreneur based out of Cape Town, well, rather an international entrepreneur based out of Cape Town and Berlin, Germany. Yeah, I guess we're here today. We'll be talking about water and why it's so important for humankind.
Cool. So, can I ask you, Aubrey, what is the significance of water to you?
Significance of water to me. You know, this question is interesting because if I were to answer this while I was in Germany, or while I'm in Germany, it's a completely different answer. But I think the significance of water to me here in the African context, right? I guess water is everything. You know, without water you can't bath. Without water you can't literally eat. Without water you can't do anything. So I guess water is quite a significant part of, I guess, our daily lives, you know, and just our well-being as well, because we need to be hydrated as people. More so, we need to be hydrated with clean water, you know. So the first issue is accessibility of water, right? The second issue is accessibility of clean water, you know. So to your question as to what's the significance of it, the significance of it is pretty much everything in my view, you know, because without water we have a dirty, hungry, hydrated, unhealthy, malnutritious nation, you know.
I actually like that answer. I like that. Okay. So how has water played a role in your life?
How's water played a role in my life? Oh wow! So do you know what's interesting? So oftentimes a lot of people meet me now, you know, they think I grew up in the suburbs, you know, where there's clean water, there's like running water from the sink or from the bathroom. Well, the reality is I grew up in a shack, right? But the interesting thing though is that you'd never tell when you see me on the street because I was always clean, you know, because my mom made sure that your shirt is crisp, it's white, it's clean, from water, because you can't have a crisp white shirt without clean water or water to wash it. At the same time, just washing yourself, no matter what the setup you have at home, if you have access to water, you actually have an opportunity to look indifferent when you step outside your home, you know, to other kids. So that's the role that water has played in my life, in that it somewhat made me look very different to other kids. Well, if you look under the hood, you'd see that this guy is actually, you know, coming maybe from a disadvantaged family or whatever the case may be, you know. So I guess, I'm not sure if I've answered you.
Definitely.
Yeah?
Definitely have.
Yeah? I got good answers, bro.
So what is your take on water being a human right?
I mean, this is a very overdue conversation. You know, it's supposed to be a basic human right. You know, again, we've just spoken of 2 points where it has somewhat made it obvious to both of us as we, you know, chatting, that water is actually a basic necessity for people, right? Regardless of the background. So I think, you know, we think of internet being the most basic thing right now in terms of what people should have, but the reality is we're rushing for the internet while there's still like unresolved issues like water being inaccessible to people. So it just has to be a human right, you know, like people have to have water. You know, we've just mentioned now, it's like, you know, remember one of the main reasons in South Africa, for example, that there's a school uniform. Right, in other countries in the world, there is no school uniform. But in South Africa, there's a school uniform. Why is that? So that you don't actually see the inequality or the differences in terms of where people come from, right? So now if you've got a dirty kid and you've got a clean kid, that draws the line immediately. That, this guy is somewhat well off and this guy is not. So if you make it a human right, which is what it's supposed to be, right? You don't have that, you know, obvious separation between society or people, you know. Not saying we should mask it, pretend as if we're all equal, but the reality is there's just certain basic things that you need to have. For example, in South Africa, I think it's the Act of 2002 or something. There's something called Basic Free Services, right? BFS or something like that, where you're entitled as a citizen in South Africa, if you're earning below a certain threshold, to basic water and basic electricity, right? So I think the South African Constitution, to a great extent, has made water a basic, you know, like a human right, because you can apply. For instance, my business does those applications called the Indigent Act, right? Which is where you're entitled to basic free water and electricity, you know? So I think if many more countries can implement such a policy, you know, it would actually make a huge difference.
Definitely.
Yes, sir.
Definitely. Those were some nice, insightful questions you gave me.
Yeah, this is my work, bro, because so I've started working in the township lately, you know.
Yeah.
I'm like trying to, I think I might have told you one thing, trying to make it easy for people to exchange value amongst each other, you know. And one of the things that I've realized, like, fuck, you're trying to solve a secondary problem where the assumption is that people are already digitized. Well, the reality, they're not. Why? Because they can't get into the digitized ecosystem. Because why? They don't have KYC documents that the banks need for them to have a bank account. Why? Because someone stays in a squatter camp and they share one fucking tap and it's 20, 30 of them. They have, like, you know, stolen electricity and you can't ask that person for a utility bill for them to open a bank account. It's ridiculous. So I've created this engine that's linked to the Home Affairs database that allows you to verify people on the fly and give them a digital ID. But while I was doing that, I've unearthed this reality that in South Africa there's the Indigent Act that actually says, no, the Indigent Act that says everyone is entitled to basic free water and services like water and electricity. So, you know, those things we don't know until you actually start, you know, working on such problems. Yeah.
I think this is going to be quite interesting because this question is, do you have a story that you can think about that relates to water? Be it now.
I mean, I've shared one earlier. For instance, how I've grown up. I'm more than happy to maybe take that from a different angle or however. But with water, I mean, for me, as I've told you, what it's like. You know that thing, when you grow up, you're extremely poor. I mean, Vux, you know this. I was extremely poor growing up, you know. You grow up and you always have, it's like this thing on your shoulder, you know. Exactly. Where you're just constantly trying to make sure that you're not profiled by society. And you know, kids, they'll single you out, you know, just because, yeah, kids are fucking assholes, you know, yeah, you know, kids are fucking assholes. So they'll single you out that, your hair is not combed today, or your shirt is dirty, or you're not looking washed today, and all those things. And that would, of course, make you feel kind of way, you know. But for me, because we had water at home, you know, even though back in the time, the tap and the toilet was outside, you know, like remember back in the days when before it was shacks, and then government NC took over in 1994, then they started implementing the RTP houses. Yes. Then the RTP houses, they didn't have the toilets and running water inside. It was still outside. So that's the time I come from. You know, before those RTP houses were demolished, then people started building better houses. You know what I mean? Face bricks and all those things, you know? So now for me, you know, like the I guess essence of water is just that feeling that it had given me growing up, knowing that when I step outside the gate, you can't tell if I'm from a well-off family, wealthy family, or a poor family. Just because why? I'm washed, you know, I'm clean. My clothes are clean, I smell fresh, even though it's sunlight. Like, you know those brick soaps that we used to use like back in the days. Like, even though you would wash with that thing and your clothes would be washed with that thing and the dishes would be washed with that thing, but guess what? When you step outside the gate, you know, you're looking clean, smelling clean, you know? So for me, I guess that's the, you know, story for that I have on water, you know? Because you know, self-belief and confidence goes a long way. You know, especially when you're coming from like backgrounds that are somewhat shaky, you know, because if you grow up in flipping Claremont, somewhat confidence is embedded in you because how you just grow up, you know. There's a lot of things that you don't have to question that inherently or in turn allow you to not question yourself in any measure, you know, and therefore you have this, call it untainted ego or confidence, you know, that you then of course carry out to the world and so forth. But if you're coming from Kailicha, things like not having water, things like taking a shit, excuse my language, taking a shit outside the house, the fact that that's how you like how it's set up, that has something to do with how you feel about yourself. And of course, how you feel about yourself has a lot to do with your confidence, you know? So for me, having water allowed me to not have to first fight these kind of things where I'm like, you know what, I am better as a person, even though I'm like we're growing up poor. You know, I'm no different to the next person, for example, or the guy that showered and me having to wash in a Vascom, you know. Which is what it somewhat ended up becoming, because I didn't care that you took a shower or you wash in a bath or in a Vascom. You know, the reality is when we stand next to each other, we both clean, and you can't tell. But this guy showered and the other guy had a smaller nyana, you know, not even a bath, a smaller nyana Vascom there. You know what I mean? So for me, I guess that's the story. You know, where I guess water is concerned.
Is water an equalizer in this sort of way?
In a way, you could look at it that way. From a socio-economic standpoint, you could say it's somewhat an equalizer.
Because I get the idea that you're like linking water to dignity the whole time. It's like like if you can, but also if you misuse water and you don't really have that luxury, it can also be associated with guilt. Can you maybe elaborate a bit on that? And just look at books.
Absolutely.
So just hold on for a second. Try not to move too much forward and back.
Forward, yeah.
Because I have to. I'm scared.
I'm with you. No, I'm with you. I'm with you. Okay, no,
So,
let me just keep it here.
Roll, clap, please. Thank you.
Amazing. So, I mean, you could actually associate water with dignity, right? I mean, I'm not sure if you guys were aware of the story in where I stayed in Kailicha, Site B, no? They started rebuilding some of the shacks that were there. They started building roads because there weren't roads. But then this was at the time of Helensile. You know, there was like a big outcry about this in the media. People were striking, you know, like you'd say in Germany, they demonstrating, you know. So anyways, people felt that the dignity was basically being overlooked, yeah, primarily because the DA at the time, which was the party that was running the city, had built these mini toilets, right? Where you could take a shit, but the entire community could see, right? So people, there was like, you know, like a big outcry about this, like how could you, this is actually, you know, taking away our dignity as the people and so forth and so forth. Similarly, you know, when you don't have water and you're dirty, you know, you're actually taking away an opportunity for someone to feel good about themselves, because when you feel clean, you feel good. When you feel good, you do good to people or in your environment. So what I'm trying to say is that there could be an extrapolation, absolutely, between dignity and water. You know, more so as water, on water as a human right or a human basic right, you know. So I guess that's the extrapolation, you know. But then we also know on the flip side that people waste water, you know. But again, you see, that's like a different conversation. That one is on education, right? Because if you're not aware of something, you don't know it, you know. You might, you know, for instance, a lot of things for me, I had to re-educate myself when I've stepped out of that society, which is the township, moving into university, meeting different people, for things like you can't leave the lights on, for example, you know. While if you grew up in the township, even though you know we don't have money for electricity, but it's not in your conscience to make sure that lights are off in the entire house before you sleep, you know. So you could see that as a way of wasting electricity you don't have, you know. But because you're unaware of it, you know, consciously and subconsciously, you know, you just do it anyhow. Same applies to water, you know, the same scenario with electricity, because you find in the township people are buying 20 rand electricity, but you walk around at 11 at night, all the houses are on. You're like, what the hell? You know, you're overusing something you don't have, you know what I mean, which is technically money, you know. So similarly with water could be said, because people don't really see it as a waste, because why? It's like having that whole mentality of nothing to lose, you know. When you're at zero, you can't even see yourself, you know, I guess, wasting things because you have nothing to waste, you know, or you believe you have nothing to waste, you know, because why? You have nothing. So similarly with the water, I think it's an education thing, because you walk around the township, you see the tap is running, and you see this a lot. The tap is running, kids are on the street, they're splashing each other with the hose pipe and all these things, and people are just like, you know, getting water with the Vascoms, throwing it on the street, instead of finding a way to preserve that water to maybe flush with it because they've done like, you know, laundry with it, you know, they wash their clothes. If they were educated enough, they would keep that water and make sure to use the same water when they're flushing their toilet, you know. So I think for me, it's not a case of with people just being wasteful, but it's just people being unaware of their actions as to what's the net effect to it, you know. You could even tell people that there's no water. They won't think immediately that I need to be more cautious, I need to save more water so that I'm not contributing to the low dam levels, for example, or the consumption of the low dam levels at a higher rate because we're wasting water, therefore we need to use more water, you know. So I think for me, that's basically how I see it, you know.
I just want to get your focus again.
No problem.
Try to stay out of her forward or back, please. Else.
Like this, right?
Yeah, but whatever is more comfortable.
This is more comfortable.
I've got 2 more questions.
Okay, 2 more is my favorite number.
Alright, obviously you know Bruce Lee, right?
One more time, yes, I do know Bruce Lee, yes.
So he once said, be like water.
Yes.
So what does that phrase, mantra, slogan?
To me, I think it's less about water, more about liquid, you know, because it could be petrol that you know, in the same scenario or same like analogy where it's like, be water, my friend, be formless, you know, when you are in a, say, basically the whole thing of you need to become the thing, you know, and basically form yourself to become the thing for you to be able to easily maneuver within it because you are it, you know, you're formless. So for me, it's less about water, but more of the physics, I guess, behind the form liquid, you know, and the shape it takes when it changes either the environment or the packaging, you know. So that's like how I've always taken it, more than associated it fully with water. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And the last question is, what cultural significance or symbolism does water have to you?
To me, cultural, I think it's more on a spiritual level, you know? I mean, I am a cultural person, but I think it's more on a spiritual level because, funny enough, as much as we might think and assume that water, I mean, drinkable water, for sure, we have issues with it in terms of its abundant nature, right? But for me, water, for instance, if you look at the ocean, for me, it always signifies abundance, you know? It always signifies openness, you know? It always signifies the ability or the fact that life is constantly changing and you need to change with it because water is formless, you know what I mean? So for me, I mean, which is why I'm always staying close to the ocean where I can see water, you know? I mean, you've been to my place. I always make sure that I can see water so that it can give me that sense of abundance, you know, that sense of infinity even, you know, if I stand at the ocean and I look in just like just the water, like, and I do that like every second day, every day, where I just go to the ocean, just particularly for the sensation, where I just stand there and look at the nothingness and the everythingness of everything, if you understand what I mean. While at the same time you're able to stretch your brain to whatever magnitude because of that. It's like infinity and elasticity, which is formlessness, somewhat have a relationship in my view, you know, which is like formlessness, elasticity, which is the brain is very like elastic, water is formless, infinity, it's like abundance, and you know, so that's I guess from my side how spiritually, more less culturally, how I would I guess connotate or extrapolate where water is concerned. Yeah.
I'm gonna ask a terrible question.
There's no terrible question. There's no terrible question at all.
Do you think people in Durban think we because of all the flooding.
I mean, because of all the floods. I mean, fire can make you a meal. Fire can also burn you, you know? When you've got burnt by fire, probably for some time until you recover from the pain it has caused you, you know, you will start seeing it as some form of utility that aids in you receiving a meal, you know. But before that, you're just seeing it as this thing that has, you know, created, hurt or pain in your life, you know. So I think similarly with the floods in Durban, if you'd ask me what I think about water, I'd probably tell you to fuck off, because it probably, like, you know, took someone close to me, because we've had, you know, people dying like from the floods. We have houses, you know, being swept away by the water, and you then come to me and be like, do you think water is a human right? Fuck no. My answer is probably going to be like on the opposite tangent, like on a complete opposite tangent. Why? Because at that particular moment in time, I'm not so feeling amazing about water. You know what I mean? So I think for me, provided that times may be different, maybe if you'd asked them 3-4 months ago, they'd certainly be within the same perspective that water is a human right. But now they wouldn't even answer you within the same context that you are asking them. You know, their question, they'd probably be more emotional. Just think of all the loss they've basically, you know, incurred due to water, you know. So I think it would somewhat be an unfair question to ask anyone from Durban at this point. Yeah.
So I suppose these guys have to take a nuanced approach to this thing.
Very. I mean, I think it would be insensitive to even approach them.
Yeah, it would be very insensitive. Like right now, you don't want to be talking to Durban people about water-related things, you know, unless you want to talk about floods, where you attack the thing directly, you know, then you might have a better conversation. But if you want to keep it loose, talk about water, giving people an opportunity or a platform for them to express other frustrations they have around a similar subject matter that's not what you're even asking them, you know. So I think for me, you'd be creating a platform for people to vent, you know, for people to actually say how they feel, but it would be less about water.
But I mean, these guys can also just build the infrastructure to make things flood-proof and actually just save that water from.
I mean, so do you know, many years ago in Ireland, there used to be no snow, right? And then the weather changed. Then there was like a big snowstorm, right? Ireland had to get Germany particularly and other European countries to come in and aid with the equipment, because snow is a big deal, you know. You need the things that spray the salt on the road so that the snow, I'm not sure the exact physics reaction snow has to salt, but cars are able to drive better, you know, because if you have the winter tires, for example, you need the things that like would sweep the snow off the road. So you need to be ready for that, you know. So my point is, until something happens, then people start being ready for it. So if this would happen again in 10 years, you know, we have every right to be like, what the fuck? Yeah, like what the hell, you know? Because you've seen that Durban, or South Africa for that matter, can be exposed to such floods. How do we make things flood-proof? You know, let's actually consider or reconsider our infrastructure to accommodate for such things, because we've seen it happening, you know. Because similarly, we can't bulletproof our infrastructure for snow. We've never had, you know what I mean? You know, we'd die here, bro. Like our houses are not insulated, you know. Like we don't have the Heizung, like the heating system, you know. Like in Germany, there's no AC, there's a heating system. Which is why, even for them, when there was a year 3 years ago, no, just before 2 years before COVID, there was a year where it was hotter than any other year in Germany. I think it was hitting 38, right? It was so hot that it was unbearable. They couldn't cope with it because they were never ready. They were never ready for such heat, you know? Now they like don't have aircons, they don't have nothing, because why? It has never been that hot you know. So I think for me, it's a matter of something having to happen first, because we are proof-based, evidence-based people as like humans, you know. So we need evidence for us to bulletproof, you know. So I think that's my take on it.
We are not Noah.
Absolutely not. You're absolutely not. Absolutely not.
No, it would be like a very sensitive situation.
Yeah, it's like, hey guys, you know, like I had to do the thing that day. You know, was it Noah that did the?
One of the
Yeah,
problems.
Ima guys, are we like reps?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, cool. Gents, I've got a